And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Danny Cannell. Where'd Danny go? That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson.
And he got a cramp.
There we go. Coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, and come and join us in the chat, a.k.a. the Cover 3 tailgate. How about this one? Let's just jump right off the bat. We got a little Maction tonight. Jim jumped in 2 hours before we got started and said, I know the lock spot is tomorrow, but I have a question for Bud about the Ohio-Toledo game tonight. The total opened at 50.5 and is now down to 44.5. Any good opportunity to jump in on the over after we get 6 points of movement?
Well, I actually made it 43. So I would say no, but I definitely I did like that earlier in the week.
Tom, is this what's the Twitter tip?
The Twitter tip is the over in Eastern and Buffalo.
That's it. And is that because we are looking at a situation where it's gonna be windy in the glass bowl?
It's gonna be windy in both. It's more of a situation of like Buffalo wakes up and gives up 35 points on the road this year. So,
well, that's always something to notice. Jim, we appreciate you and everybody who jumped in and got the conversation going. Yes, Bud.
I'm over 2 there. I haven't bet it yet, but Eastern's O-line is pretty sketch. And I do think there's some chance Buffalo's D-line can get after them. Now, can Buffalo cover them? Your guess is as good as mine. They've been pretty banged up in the secondary.
Yeah, that game, again, Wednesday night in the house that Max Crosby bought a new carpet for. There in Ypsilanti. All right. I know that we normally do a big game breakdown a little bit later. And on Tuesday, we were able to, go inside the matchup for Indiana and Ohio State. But we had a major development on Tuesday night as we learned from the Columbus Dispatch and other multiple reports that starting center Seth McLaughlin suffered a torn Achilles during practice on Tuesday and is expected to miss the remainder of the season. This is an offensive line for Ohio State that has been banged up all throughout this season. Josh Simmons is out with an injury. You've had to move the pieces around, even within the context of some of these games. And now you're going into this massive game against Indiana. You're going into the potential of playing for a Big Ten championship and a college football playoff with needing a new center. Yikes. Tom, what's the adjustment here? And how does it, let's say short term first, how does this change the outlook for Saturday's game against the Hoosiers?
Short term, it certainly makes you a little bit more worried about facing Indiana's defense.
Yep.
Like, they are pretty strong up there. They've been pretty good all season, and now you've got to work at a new center, and you've already been working in new players on that line. And it's like the last couple of weeks they've played Purdue and Northwestern, and it's been beneficial for them because it has allowed their new, line, the new configuration of it, some just snaps just to get familiar with each other in situations where you really weren't at risk of losing games. And you'd seen improvement in what they were doing. I mean, again, you have to take the opponent into consideration, but they seem to be kind of figuring things out. And now you lose your starting center when you've already lost your starting left tackle, which caused you to move your best offensive lineman, your guard, to left tackle from guard. And now you're going to be having another backup in there. Short term, it certainly lowers their ability to beat Indiana this week. Long term, I think it is probably a death blow to their chances to win a national title.
I tend to agree because remember, they lost Josh Simmons. They also lost Michalski, who was basically before they went to Donovan Jackson at left tackle, they went to Michalski. So to me, like, that's an issue, a huge one. I a lot of times think of like injuries is okay, one's okay, two's okay, but at a certain point, like, there's a cluster effect where it's like this is just not something that works. Like Ohio State went out and got those transfers for the offensive line. Michalski's back, excuse me. But because they were worried about what they had, right? The backup played last year. So the fact that they felt the need to go out and replace him probably says something about what happens when you face a team like a Michigan last year. Or I don't know really who the team is this year who has defensive linemen on the interior who are just going to destroy you. Texas at times, Ole Miss probably is one that scares you. Penn State actually would probably scare me a pretty good bit. Oregon. So just named 4 that you could face in the playoff. Oregon is a team you're going to face almost certainly unless you lose to Indiana in a couple weeks there in the Dome. This could be a fatal blow for their title chances. As for this weekend, I think probably how do you handle the protections, right? Do you call more QB run stuff? I think with that because it gives you an extra blocker, maybe a little bit less complicated stuff there. That'd be my guess. Like if I'm Will Howard, I'm buying a couple extra Advil in advance of Saturday. But I think they're probably going to have to run him more. Don't you think, Danny? Like with the backup center now, like your left guard's playing left tackle, I'd be worried about like protections busting, fumbles, on the quarterback. Just run the ball and get out of there if you can.
So why do you think their odds haven't changed, either for this game or for the national championship? Because I agree with all of you, and yet the odds makers are like, nah, no big deal.
One thing has changed. Total
went down.
Right.
Yeah, it was 52.5 last night when this started leaking, and then
it's 51.
51, yeah.
So the center is like the quarterback on the offensive line, right? I mean, left tackle is a little bit easier. I know it's the most important position, protects your blind side, but you're kind of out there on an island. You're doing your own thing. You're listening to what the center is communicating. I think Will Howard, being a veteran quarterback, helps somewhat. But in a lot of systems, the center is in charge of calling out protections, calling out who the offensive line is working towards. Is it the Mike linebacker? And sometimes if they're a nickel or they're at a smaller personnel package, you might shift that and change that. Who is you're identifying as the Mike as far as who you're working up to. So that becomes more of an issue up front. Bud, you mentioned it. It's the most simple thing in the game. But the quarterback center exchange, look at what McLaughlin happened last year with him with the shotgun snaps. And that was such a big deal. How does that happen with a new center? Is he fine with shotgun? Is it different when he's live and it's on this stage? How about short yardage goal line center exchanges, quarterback, sneak exchanges? Those are something that, we take for granted all the time, but with somebody you're not used to, every center sort of has a sweet spot of where where you like to put your hands, where the ball comes up clean and there's no issues. It's something to keep an eye on. And I would agree with you guys. I do think it impacts them, especially when it comes to depth. Maybe it doesn't impact that much against Indiana, but over the course of the next 4 to 5 games, which you would need to accomplish your main goal of winning a national championship, all of those issues come into play. Communication, center, quarterback exchange. And then we haven't, I saved the last is blocking. How is a backup going to be blocking and in pass protection? All of those types of things. So, yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I think you do probably have to move Will Howard more, utilize him more in the run game, all because of this.
I mean, we're talking about Indiana, obviously, because it's the big game this weekend, but look at to the next week, too. You know what team I really don't want to face with a whole bunch of questions on the interior of my offensive line? Yeah, I don't think Michigan has a shot in hell of scoring enough points to win that game. But, man, life could be a hell of a lot more miserable on that Saturday with that interior offensive line in that condition.
So, as Tom mentioned, the 2 opponents since the Penn State game were Purdue and Northwestern. It's very easy for me to then say this is going to be the best test that we've seen for Ohio State since that Penn State game. Here is what I would be encouraged by is that as a whole, going into the Penn State game, one question I had was about Ohio State's success in those short yardage situations, because to that point, they had not been excellent. But in that game, when they needed those hard yards, they were able to find a way to get it. A lot of it was Will Howard. Now, again, if Seth McLaughlin's a big part of that, you need to be able to replicate it. But I am not. If they were already poor in that area and poor when they got that test, I would be very concerned. I think that they will have a better option. But that's one thing that comes to mind for me. An issue from the midseason that now you take out an important piece of the offensive line. What does that do for play calling? What does that do for decision-making and execution? When you're in third short, when you're in 4th and 1, when you are trying to figure out what you're going to do in the middle of the field or near the goal line or in the red zone, how does having a new center there for Will Howard impact what you want to do and also your execution? Those are things that I'm going to be keeping an eye on, especially in the first half of this game, first couple of times that those pop up.
So their title odds didn't change at all?
They might have changed. They're still the favorite.
Grabbing the phone right now.
Well, I'm looking at places that I know have yes/no odds, right? Because if you're just offering yes odds, maybe you change everybody else's and you rip the customer off a little bit, depending on which book it is, right? Like just that they don't always get better. So look for yes/no. Like yes/no would be more telling to me. Like, did the no price change on Ohio State?
I'm going to be on CBS Sports Network later today for the Early Edge, 2 p.m. Eastern time, if you want to come hang out for some gambling talk on the weekend in college football. And one of our A block segments is asking for the Big Ten SEC props. Like, hey, here's like the champion's going to be from the Big Ten. The champion's going to be from the SEC. This news flipped me to SEC, that there are more teams from the Southeastern Conference that I would take in your grab bag of, go grab some teams, because now for me, it's just Oregon for the national championship. And then I would throw in a couple of SEC teams and give myself some more chances if I had to put together a starting five based on this news. So interesting moving forward. Huge test, not just this week, but as Tom mentioned, against Michigan moving forward. Coming up on the other side, it's time to open the market. Day Trading Danny checks in, stock up, stock down, and big game breakdown. Next. Busy day. Hey, ho, 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 ho.
Oh, ho, ho, here we go.
Oh, yeah, come on. We got to give the animation some love. Let's open the market.
Tell you what, I'm selling Josh Pate and any sort of debate that goes down after we got after it yesterday in studio a little bit. I'm selling my Josh Pate stock. But that's a side note. Somebody in the comments was chirping a little bit. Probably depends on your point of view, who you thought won that little discussion we had. All right. I am selling Boise State as a team that's going to get a first round bye. I think this was total the little tease to dangle out there for the committee. We've talked about this for the past several years. They have to do something, right, to sort of spark some interest, show, hey, we're at least giving a little love to the little guy. When I read and reviewed their strength of schedule currently, and that has been a very hot topic with all this debate that we've had with SEC teams, Indiana strength of schedule. Currently, Boise State strength of schedule, 77th. Not great. But the interesting thing is that the remaining strength of schedule is 87%. Those three teams in the Big 12, BYU's 31st, Colorado's 32nd, Arizona State 51st. So even if it was Arizona State, I still think they would be a team that would still leapfrog Boise into that one, assuming they're all 2-loss teams. If you get a 3-loss team, I think that's off the table. I don't think that happens. So I'm still willing to sell Boise State as getting the first round bye in the playoffs based on those numbers there, based on what we've seen years past. And I think it's probably going to be hard for Boise State fans if they're like, wait a second, I thought we were sitting there pretty. They are not afraid to move teams out of those spots no matter what transpires before us, including Boise State winning out.
I don't hate the sell, but I also, to your point, understand why it has been marketed as such. That why the way that they're packaging, when they're going to be saying, okay, the rankings came out. What's the headline? Boise, Boise, Boise. The idea of the 12-team playoff and the idea that these 4 buys are not reserved for the 4 power conferences. It just seems like such an easy top line thing to be able to communicate to fans that haven't been following this, that they're trying to pitch this to, because this invitational is an entertainment product. And I've cooked up all kinds of crazy scenarios where Boise ends up being a part of screwing over the Big 12. But I do think that in general, they are encouraged by the fact that UNLV is inside the top 25, but that doesn't necessarily mean that UNLV will be in the final top 25. So we'll see moving forward.
I think it's far more sinister than that.
Ooh.
I mentioned it on our reaction last night. What happened with this week's rankings is Before BYU lost to Kansas, there was a chance the Big 12 could get 2 teams in. After BYU loses to Kansas, they knock them all the way down to where they did. So that way they guarantee the Big 12 will only get 1 spot, which will then leave another at-large spot open for the SEC. That's what that's about.
Okay.
I like it. I like where your mind's at. Although,
no,
yeah.
Who runs the sport? Which 2 leagues run the sport?
Yeah.
Which 2 leagues are running this playoff? Which 2 leagues bring the money to it? They're going to make sure they do anything they can to get many of those 2 leagues teams in as possible. So by bumping down BYU, I'm telling you, the Big 12 champ will be the 4 seed.
All right.
Yes.
Buy or sell for all of the traders on here. 5 teams from the SEC are in the playoffs. I'm selling. I think 4
Sell
is the
because
number.
I think Tennessee's done.
I think it's a sell as well. Like I wouldn't put my house on it, but unless Indiana gets boat raced by Ohio State, I don't think the resume of whoever else you have out there really stacks up all that well.
Yeah, I think Tennessee losing to Georgia will end up kind of being a death knell for their playoff hopes. Because if you look at their remaining schedule, like what
Vanderbilt, they better beat.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what I'm saying. They've got UTEP and Vandy. They can't really improve their resume in any noticeable way. So Tennessee is going to need a lot of help from other teams. And also, there's just the fact that, we talk about it, but Texas A&M could lose, Texas could lose, Georgia could lose again, Alabama could lose again, Ole Miss could lose again. We're all just assuming these teams are going to win every single one of their games. But the SEC is the greatest league in the world, so anybody in it can beat anybody else. We can't forget that.
I think that's kind of the thing, right? It is that you have that many 2- and 3-loss teams. It's hard to make an argument for 5, to get in. Tennessee in the end is in. I think you get into kind of weird situation if you get the whole Texas loses to A&M deal. What do you do then? Can you?
Well, that's my next sell is specifically for Texas. I am selling Texas as a 2-loss team that is even in this conversation. Because if we've been talking all of this time about strength of schedule, Texas has 1 win over a SEC opponent with a winning record, and that team is Vanderbilt. That's the only one they have a win over a winning record. They have 500 teams, but they haven't beat teams with over a 500 record. So I think Texas, who probably is one of those teams and fan bases that feels really good right now, hey, we're sitting there at 3. We could even lose a game. I would caution strongly against that. Now, they also probably feel pretty good. I think the early line is a touchdown for them at Kyle Field, which I think will be really interesting, how that line could potentially move depending on what happens this weekend. But I am selling Texas as part of those 2-loss group of teams from the SEC that would get in.
I just don't know if the committee's going to have the guts to drop them from 3 to out based on 1 win.
I mean, they did for Texas Christian, but they won't be for the University of Texas.
That's kind of my thought. Should they? I think if you look at the schedules and you look at the resumes, almost certainly. Will they? I'm a little bit skeptical of that now.
Okay. I got my basket of teams. I'll see if you guys think I should rearrange them, because I might rearrange 1 in this basket of stocks. Got a little ETF. So you remember the quarterback-driven ETF portfolio, the teams that I was buying: Oregon, Ohio State, Miami, Indiana. This is from a few weeks ago. Those were my buys, saying I needed to see those teams. I thought they could win the national championship because of their quarterback play. The teams that I was selling: Penn State, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Bama, and Georgia. Now, the teams that I was considering moving, elevating, rearranging, getting some diversification into my portfolio was Bama or Georgia. I am not adjusting Bama. I still think we're putting way too much stock in performances from Bama's offense against really bad teams. And the more we've learned about LSU losing to Florida, the more we've learned about Mizzou, and the more we Mercer's just whatever, it is what it is. I'm not convinced that Milroe being healthy is just the answer for them. We still haven't seen him be that quarterback in both areas that can win from the pocket. If he has his legs, it's off the charts. It gives you a chance. But as far as winning the Natty, I still think he has shortcomings if you can take that away. And I think the defenses he would face in a potential playoff run would be able to take that away. I think this game this weekend is pretty interesting for them against Oklahoma.
It is.
Now, Oklahoma's offense is going to be whatever. It's probably disaster, but I'll be curious to see if Oklahoma can take away his legs and what he does through the air.
All right, I want you to watch that entire game.
What Oklahoma? No, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting game. I want you to watch the entire thing from start to finish and then tell us how interesting it was.
Well, listen, anytime you get a chance to watch Do Not Contact Arnold, because we already know that guy's got the do not contact tag as soon as he hits the portal. Anytime you get to watch the future quarterback for somebody else, it's a good opportunity to get in some scouting for 2025. I will take the variance of Alabama over whatever ghosts might still be in between Carson Beck's head.
Ooh. I was thinking about elevating Georgia because I think what the upside is with Carson Beck throwing the football the way he did against Tennessee.
I've got them both in my personal.
You're all in. So you have them both in. I'm not. I was debating on elevating Georgia up just because of what I saw from Carson Beck. Fully aware that he could have one of those 3 interception games, but with the defense he's got behind him, they still almost came back against Bama. The Ole Miss game was sideways. That was the one that's embarrassing. But I still think with Beck and what he can do, I have more belief that they could be the team that could pull it off than Bama.
I think that as long as Tate Ratledge is healthy and that offensive line is good, Carson Beck will be fine. I think most of Carson Beck's problems coincided with losing Ratledge and that line being unable to block, causing Beck to be under pressure a lot more often, which is when he gets really dumb.
Got it.
All right, that's all I need. I'm elevating Georgia into the teams that could win the title, and I am keeping Bama out.
All right.
I think both should be in.
I feel like Bama is a little more fraudulent because of I think we could have been fooled more by the teams they've played lately, and we're looking so much better.
Does Bama's defense fall into the category that you said of hey, Bama's kind of blitzing teams offensively who kind of suck defensively? Bama's defense is better than LSU's, but do we think it's really good?
No. That's why the whole composite of all of it, Jalen Miller, I feel better about Georgia being a team that can win it than I do about Bama.
Alabama's defense has enough special players that I'm not going to call it the unit that gives me confidence, but it is, big stage game. You need somebody to go make a play. Deontay Lawson checks that box for me. I'm like, okay, that's somebody who can go out there with all the experience that he has, the huge games he's played in, and the role that he has at the middle of that defense. I could see him being able to lead an inspired effort. But look, it's Georgia and Alabama, the super talented teams. It's a game that's won at the margins. And I think that Alabama could close the performance gap defensively just enough.
I think too, and I think this is part of what Danny said, but I'm repeating it. When Alabama is at its best, it is when Jalen Milroe is running. For Alabama to win the college football playoff, they're going to need Milroe to use his legs every single week against these teams. That is going to wear on him. Because now, the way they're doing it in the regular season, it's been in some games, he's just kind of chilling and running a little bit. And then in their big games, he's been running like crazy. These are all big games.
Yeah.
Fair.
Football is a physical game, and this will be your 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th games of the season.
Last thing I had for you, we can go over it quickly because I know we got a bunch of stuff to do. I had a little buy and sell on the coaching carousel because I was doing a little research as far as coaching candidates. I'm buying as far as guys who potentially
Ray Lewis.
Yeah, that was my first. That's actually what made me think of it. I am selling that one as much as I could load up on a short sell because he doesn't even have a job right now. I'm just selling as much Ray Lewis as I can. Our boy Matt Zenitz already said there's no real facts behind it. I will say, though, in the speaking circuit, this preseason, Ray Lewis was one of the other people that did talk to FAU's football team, and they did rave about his performance to the team. So maybe he did turn some heads. I don't know. Why didn't I get mentioned in these? Maybe my speech didn't leave as much of an impression as Ray Lewis's did, but I would sell all I could of his. I'm buying Andy Colton-Nicky, Will Stein, Glenn Schulman, and Mike Denbrock, as well as one head coach and Barry Odom at UNLV. I think all those coaches potentially will be in the market and potentially on the move. I'm selling a couple names that I saw. Now, one is very obvious because they just gave him the bump. No matter what happens, I don't think Kirk Cignetti's leaving. Obviously, he gets the extension. I think that was to shore that up, but I think he wasn't going to leave anyway. And Chip Kelly's a name that I keep seeing out there. I don't think Chip Kelly goes. I think he stays at Ohio State, regardless of what happens this season. I think he's got a pretty good thing going. I don't think Ryan Day is going to leave or get fired anytime soon, like this offseason. So I think Chip Kelly would be extremely selective, and I don't know if there's a job open that Chip Kelly would say, yeah, I'm going to jump for that one.
See, that's my thought with all the coaches you named. What jobs are going to be open that are going to be attractive to them? Because right now, the only jobs that are open are G5 gigs. And even Power 4 coordinators at this point tend to be making more money than the head coaches at a lot of these G5 schools are making. So I don't know. Like you'd have to see some Power 4 gigs open up for guys like I think Shulman and Kotelnicki and those guys to jump and leave. Like I could see Barry Odom leaving UNLV for maybe something he considers a higher profile G5 gig, but even then, I'm not convinced that would happen. As for Cignetti, I don't think he would leave, but what do we expect Indiana to be next year? Because that's a veteran team that features a lot of guys brought in from the portal. If a big-time blue bloody type of school came with an offer, I think he would very much consider it.
I don't know what jobs are opening.
That's
the thing is I think a lot of folks are spooked by this house settlement thing.
So I think that somebody, oh baby, let's get reckless. I think somebody went super back channel with Cignetti. The way that he very quickly said, me, my agent, and my wife sat down and we played the what if game. Sounds like they had some options. Like, sounds like their agent was able to sit there at the table and say, well, what if hypothetically this school were interested? And what if hypothetically this school decided to fire their coach and they were interested? And Curt Cignetti said, you know, we played the what if game, and every single time that we talked it out, we came back to here talking about Indiana. Somebody had to be like, hey, so, I mean, if we fired our coach and we could put together this kind of package, would you be interested?
Like, so you're saying it's like, if we fired Billy Napier and we made you an offer, would you be interested? And then maybe the interest was declined and Billy Napier was brought back.
Well, I don't know. That's a great suggestion. I hadn't even pinpointed.
There's no intel on that. I'm just giving an example.
Yeah. That's that. I'm just, looking at it. That's maybe there's a private school in Texas that felt like it could pull together a bunch of money, and
maybe there's another school in Florida.
Maybe
UCF.
And maybe he was like, right here in the Big Ten, we got a lot of positive momentum. I think the hire of Curt Cignetti, I think the Indiana institutional investment in being good at football was a big picture thought that Indiana looked at the world of college sports and said, we just can't be a basketball school if we want to survive in the future. If we want to still be at the very top levels of college sports, we can't have Indiana football just be a club sport.
They have featured a much larger buy-in from boosters and alums in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think that somebody had a come to Jesus meeting with the big money people around Bloomington, and they said, look, those banners are getting dusty, and this is what the future is. So if you still want to be at the very top, this is the way we got to do it. And I think that that's been something that's been noticeable. So, what is it going to look like next year when the Big Ten conference schedule gets harder, when you lose a bunch of your James Madison players and you have to start over? Well, Curt Cignetti's got a great track record. Google him, as he would say, of being able to go new places, build things up. He's a phenomenal football coach and program builder. So I think that Indiana will be okay. So we'll see.
I wonder if some of the feedback he got was like, there's not that much out there. Like
really?
Maybe a Kentucky, maybe an Arkansas or something like that,
I mean, would you, if you're Curt Cignetti, would you take Florida over staying where you are?
Florida? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
If I want to win a national title before I retire, I'm not going to do it in Indiana.
Right. Like Would I take Kentucky or would I take Arkansas? No. Because I think I'm a god in Indiana until I retire.
Right.
At Kentucky or Arkansas, I'm just another guy who can't get over the hump.
There was actually probably not going to do a full like coaching carousel segment here, but obviously Tom Herman out at FAU. There was a comment earlier in the tailgate before we got started. In the wake of his recent firing, I have to ask, has anyone had as steep of a career decline as Tom Herman? 6 to 7 years ago, he was the hottest name in coaching. Only one I'd compare is Charlie Weiss. I had a couple names, but they were extremely recent, so I didn't know if there could be some more perspective.
I will say Herman didn't have like Tom Brady's coattails to ride. And he had, like, think about the quarterbacks he had. It seemed like he did a pretty good job when he was doing well. And his guys played hard for him. So I don't know, like maybe the problem is taking the FAU job, right? Like it's a cool place to live. You're getting paid pretty decent by, G5 standards, but still not a super easy place to win. It's not like everybody who goes there wins.
And the jump from the Conference USA to American, I think, was probably a little more difficult than anybody realized. And I think a lot of these schools that made that jump and were used to winning, and all of a sudden they're towards the bottom or middle to the bottom, are really coming, like not realizing that it's going to be more challenging. So they are deciding to make moves. I think UAB now, Dilfer's another one that we've talked a lot about. Like UAB is a program that was used to being at the top of the conference, all of a sudden towards the bottom. Like it's a big move. That conference was going from Conference USA, one of the bottom dwellers, up to the American, which was the Power Six for so long. And I know teams left, but I still think it's a pretty big jump.
The teams that win in the G5 seem to have, like, they consistently win in the G5. They have like real fan bases and real tradition. Like, look at App. Look at some schools like that. Just they've won at a lower level consistently, and then they moved up. FAU is a newer school. There's not, like, Danny, you live down there. How many FAU fans going around do you see? Like, there's some, but it's very much probably how UCF was like 25 years ago. It's like you're either a Gator or a Knoll. And if you live in Orlando, like, yeah, cool, UCF too. Go Knights. That's cool. Or back then the Golden Knights. But you weren't like a diehard UCF fan 25 years ago.
I've called at least between 5 and 7 FAU games, including when Lane Kiffin was there. Even when Lane Kiffin was there, I don't think the stadium was more than half full. No. It's just, and it's not a big stadium. It's not a draw.
Our friend Gigi, stellar production coordinator, does a lot of our on-site work. She went to FAU and she talks about the Lane years like that was the glory days. She's like, what? Look at all these people. This is so much fun. And then all of a sudden, Lane leaves and it's just right back to it. The two that came to my mind were they're forever linked together because they were in the same coaching cycle and they both did not even complete year 2. Willie Taggart and Chad Morris were both identified as these like rock star coming out of the group of 5, like good assistants, moving up, and they were both just so quickly like, oh, this is not working at all. Both Willie Taggart at Florida State and Chad Morris at Arkansas. So those are going to be the ones that first came to my mind in terms of the stock price was high. Everybody was buzzing about them. And then once it finally was evident that it was not going to work out, moves were made very, very quickly.
I would go with Scott Frost.
Scott Frost is another good one.
He's in the NFL now?
Is he?
I think.
Isn't Taggart doing something with the Ravens too?
Everybody's an analyst somewhere.
No, but that's great because didn't Taggart like play for Jack?
Yeah.
Played for Jack Harbaugh at Western Kentucky.
Yep. Yeah, they're very tight.
And so he's basically part of the family member. I mean, Jim Harbaugh said he would take in like a billion kids, so you welcome in all your old players, all your old coaches. That's what they do. Who's got it better than us? All right. Coming up on the other side, going inside the matchup for some of the biggest games ahead in week 13, including Notre Dame and Army, BYU, Arizona State, Colorado, Kansas, and more. Next.
CBS Sports HQ, giving you college football coverage unlike anyone else.
We're talking Big Ten.
Pre- and post-game coverage.
Are you encouraged with the way that this team responded?
Along with breaking news.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
Highlights and expert analysis.
That streak could be in jeopardy here.
Sure. What was your main takeaway from this game? How impressive was his domination?
That really changed the football game.
Let's go ahead and have some more fun.
Another wild ending.
The chaos continues. Turn to CBS Sports HQ.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast. On Wednesdays, we like to go inside the matchup. Our locks, our best bets, that'll be on Thursday. It's Big Game Breakdown. Ranked on ranked top 25 battle in Yankee Stadium, the cathedral of college football. Notre Dame and Army. Obviously, this is the moment for Army. All of your, what this could be for Army in terms of the college football playoff, in terms of, the outlook of things that can really get the attention of the college football playoff selection committee. It's going to require, a win here, not even like playing close. Now, Army's already locked in to the American Athletic Conference championship game. Army still has they're in the midst of one of their most successful seasons in a very long time. So, a loss doesn't throw everything right off the tracks, but buddy, a win would send them to the moon. So, as we're looking at the matchup itself, Danny, what stands out as something that Army needs to be focused on if they are going to be able to pull off the upset against Notre Dame?
I would suggest maybe they played a little bit different than Navy did, who turned it over 6 times. Like, good luck if you try to do that. I think for both of these teams, though, if you're Notre Dame and if you're Army, it's kind of just flip the script about what you want to do. Notre Dame, you want to try to play ahead. And if you're Army, you'd love to play ahead and try to control the pace of the game, right? You want to try to keep the ball away from Notre Dame. That's their whole modus operandi. Is they want to keep the ball away from all the athletes that they have. I do think Army is a better football team than Navy. Their quarterback doesn't have a broken thumb or something that was going on with Horvath. I think he's really dynamic as a runner and a passer. And I would say for Notre Dame, it's just, and I think they do have the advantage from playing Navy so many times that they will be at least more prepared. But it's one of those things where you have to be assignment sound. You have to make sure you don't chase what you think is the football, because then you'll quickly take the dive and all of a sudden the quarterback's got it. And then you think you've got the quarterback and you go for it and he pitches the last second. So you just have to be really assignment sound on the defensive side of the ball. And if you're Navy, if you're Notre Dame, I think you want to try to establish yourself early. Riley Leonard you're not going to confuse him for somebody that's out there throwing it, 350 yards a game, but he has gotten better and more consistent as a passer. And that's been like a very good development for Notre Dame. So I think those are kind of the points that I would look for early in this game.
I think you have to try to play a higher variance game, right, than maybe normally you would. I would look to what the Irish did. They were like 1 of 12 on third down against Virginia, but they were 1 of 9 specifically in long down and distance situations. So 5+. And that has actually been a bit of an issue for them this year. So I think if you're Army, you need to play an approach that if it goes wrong, you get your doors blown off. But if it goes right, it gives you a chance to actually win the game. Our Army doesn't need to play a close game. They need to get a win in this game, I think, right? Like just playing close and then beating Tulane in the American Championship, if they can pull that off, that would be an upset as well, in my opinion. That's probably not enough to unseat Boise,
right?
Assuming Boise runs out. So you kind of need to play this to win, not just to be respectable. And I think a key part here is selling out early on for tackles for loss and denying some of the short pass and screen stuff. And look, if that goes poorly, right, you misfit a gap, out the gate, right? Okay, you're playing up a little more, you're challenging these receivers more, you get burned deep, and then all of a sudden you're down 17-0 after 10 minutes, and it's all she wrote. I don't think you can just allow Notre Dame to play a conservative offensive game plan against you, because I think they'll probably work that out. Now, Offensively, I'm a little concerned. Like, is Bryson Daly truly healthy? Is he all the way healed up? Like that would be the big question I would have. If he's not, I don't give Army much of a chance at all in this ball game. Even if they're able to execute a defensive game plan, that makes a lot of sense. But I mean, Notre Dame's defense they just don't make a lot of mistakes, man.
Yeah.
I get Army can win this. I think but Notre Dame has to come and play like their C game. If Notre Dame plays well and they show up, they will win the ball game, regardless of how well Army plays.
Yeah, I think the worst thing for Army in this matchup is that Notre Dame still has something to play for. Like, if Notre Dame's 8-3, I would give Army a fighting chance of being able to pull this. But the fact that Notre Dame really does need to win out to get to the playoff, because that Northern Illinois loss gives them no margin for error. I think if you're Army, it's a very, very steep uphill climb. And the first thing you should do is not turn the ball over 6 times like Navy did in that game. Because if you look at the numbers and you go back, Navy was able to run the ball in that game. They averaged over 5 yards per carry. So it's not like you can't stay on schedule against this Notre Dame defense. Like, I don't know if Army can hit the same kind of explosives in the passing game that Navy did, but it's a situation where you need to take care of the football. You need to stay on schedule. You can't get stuck behind the chains. You can't get yourself put in passing situations. And defensively, you need to force some turnovers. It's very, very simple and very simplistic, but it's just the odds of Army being able to do that are very low because, like, the size of athlete they're going against in this game is completely different than anything they have seen. Like, here's Army's schedule: Lehigh, Florida Atlantic, Rice, Temple, Tulsa, UAB, ECU, Air Force, North Texas. None of those teams look anything like the Notre Dame defense they'll be seeing in this game. None of those teams look like the Notre Dame offensive linemen they'll be seeing in those games. So, like, how are you going to get that penetration? How are you going to keep them behind the chains? And, like, with Riley Leonard, how are you going to take him down even if you do get to him, because he's so mobile and he's probably faster than most of the guys on your defense? They're going to need like a perfect storm situation to pull this one off. They're going to need, like Bud said, Notre Dame to play its C game. I think Notre Dame might have to play its D game if we're being completely honest about it. So I don't see a great path for them here.
How would you? No, we don't have any Yankee Stadium principles here, right?
I don't know.
That was the turf, because there was that one Bronx Bowl, or whatever we call it, the Pinstripe Bowl. That was a problem.
Well, the Pinstripe Bowl principle is to always take the Big Ten team, because it's a Big Ten ACC bowl game, and the Big Ten has won 7 in a row. I think
it's a better league.
I think that David Cutcliffe getting Duke to a bowl win, like 8-9 years ago, was the last time that the ACC won one of those. So I've got a Big Ten ACC Pinstripe Bowl principle, though obviously that does not apply to Army and Notre Dame. Notre Dame has just been kicking the crap out of people, you know? I mean, 2 touchdowns called back for penalties last week. And, you know, the offensive line wasn't even all that
One
awesome.
of them was kind of sketchy too, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's just it was a 35-14 win that could have easily been close to another 50 burger. Like, they almost had a lot of it because of the way that the defense just totally squeezed the life out of Virginia. Both Virginia scores come very late in that ball game. Marcus Freeman's had some quotes this week about just sort of the mentality he's trying to instill, and that backing up the aggressiveness, that even when Steve Angeli comes in, they're still like throwing for it on 3rd and 8, because we're not just trying to run out the clock. Like, we want to have that edge. I think it's the right message to send to this Notre Dame team to avoid an upset in the spot. I like where they're at right here. I generally seem to lean with y'all. It would be a Notre Dame problem if this game ends up being close late in the game.
Northern Illinois, Riley Leonard, 2 picks. They put it on the ground. Like, that's the recipe for it. As long as like Notre Dame plays clean, they should be fine.
All right, let's go to a little Big 12 corner. We got BYU at Arizona State. We got Colorado at Kansas, at, of course, a little flexible here as we are in Arrowhead Stadium. Tom, what are some of the things you're looking at in these matchups?
Well, I'll start with the Colorado-Kansas one. Can the Colorado defense contain Jalen Daniels? Because I do feel like the resurgence of Kansas has coincided with Jalen Daniels playing his best football of the year. So if you're the Buffs, how do you do keeping him in check and kind of forcing him to be a passer? Because even if he's looking a little better in that aspect, I still don't trust Jalen Daniels if I have him dropping back to throw. Like, that's not what I ideally want for Kansas. So do you keep him in the pocket? The defensive line for the Buffs has been much better this season, particularly in the last couple month or so of doing that. So what kind of pressure can you get? Can you bring him down? Can you keep him from extending drives with his legs? Because I do think that, in the secondary, I think they're good enough to cover what Kansas has. So for that game, that's really what it's going to come down to me is Jalen Daniels. In the other game, can you stop Cam Scatterbo? I mean, BYU is in must-win situation here. Like, they can't – this is not a team where I feel like you can mess around in the way that BYU has messed around. And I think Arizona State Cam Scatterbo gets a lot of attention and deservedly so because he's very good, but I also think they're more complete on offense than that. Well, I think they are built around him. I think that Sam Leavitt I think Arizona State has the better quarterback in this matchup too. Just to be blunt, I've loved the BYU story. I've had a lot of fun watching their games. I made the argument last night on the show about how it's horse crap where they're ranked compared to a couple of other teams. But I just think that Arizona State's a better football team. It has been playing better football for at least the last month than BYU has. So BYU's defense is going to need to do that same kind of Kansas State formula. They're going to need to force turnovers. They're going to need to create chaos and havoc and try to get things going their way and hope it snowballs. Because if they don't, this Arizona State team is smart, man. They don't really do stupid stuff. Like Leavitt was doing some stupid stuff early in the year because he was young and still inexperienced. But I feel like as the season has gone on, he's gotten sharper and more comfortable with the assignments and just not making those same kind of mistakes. So it's going to be a tough spot for BYU.
What I was thinking about this with BYU because my note on first, getting things going to just sort of do my brainstorming. Well, what does BYU do well? Like what's their fastball?
Run game, and I think blitzing on defense.
Blitzing, yeah. I was going to say create chaos, create havoc, and try to let things snowball. And that Retzlaff, because he's kind of a gamer, can get you enough of those third down conversions, can get you enough of those big plays that don't really fit within the nice, clean model of down-to-down football. Because BYU is not a team that, to my analysis, is elite in the nice, clean, stripped down version of down-to-down football, but they have been awesome at all the things that I love, the vibesy stuff, the idea of being able to build confidence, flip a game, get the leverage in a matchup, but you're on the road. It's going to be a sellout in Tempe. Arizona State fans for one of their own cannot believe that they are in this spot, controlling their own destiny to make the Big 12 title game. You mentioned Leavitt playing a lot better and has gotten better throughout the season. It is going to be a spot where I don't know if vibes and havoc are going to be enough for BYU here. It's going to be very interesting to see how this one ends up playing out.
I agree with that. I think on the Colorado-Kansas matchup, I do think that Kansas has receivers to cover, I think Kansas can cover the Colorado receivers on the outside. But Colorado likes to spread you out and kind of work hash to hash. And I am curious about Kansas' ability to cover, the middle 25 yards of the field. How do they do there? Kansas defensive line has been a little bit better than I thought it would be this year. I thought the drop-off would be huge, but it's merely just decent drop-off. But is that good enough to get after Colorado? I don't know. Utah got after Colorado pretty well until the defense just kind of was like, well, the offense is going to do nothing for us. And we also give up a punt return, touchdown or whatever. Yeah, punt return or kickoff return?
Punt.
I'm trying to remember.
It was a punt return.
So I think there's some chance. But Colorado's defense has at times played some of the spread option stuff pretty well. I thought they did a nice job of it against UCF. Against Kansas State, a little bit less so. Baylor also ran Robertson some in that game to pretty effective. So I think there's some chance Kansas can get some of that going. Colorado does like to play a lot of man coverage, so they kind of will know what they get. I think that's one of the reasons why the spread is what it is. You think about what Illinois wants to run. Think about what Kansas did to them last year, just how confused. Now, granted, Colorado secondary is better this year than what Illinois had last year, both in terms of talent and in terms of experience. But ultimately, Kansas was able to really scheme open a lot of wide open guys against Illinois last year. And that's probably the last team they've seen that plays that much man coverage as Colorado does. So I am curious to see like how varied Colorado can be with some of its coverage stuff and some of its run fit stuff. You don't want to have really predictable run fit looks against this Kansas team because they will score on you if you do.
Danny, any other one of these like big games that have got your attention in terms of a matchup point that you've got your eye on?
Florida's feeling great right now. You know, DJ Lagway looks good, looks promising. I don't know. I think the LSU has been a team that we've all like given a lot of credit to SEC teams for beating. And I think we forget they lost to USC at the beginning of the year. Like, I think people are getting way too much credit for that one. I think Ole Miss is going to be able to, and I liked Florida last week. And I know this is kind of a trendy spot that people look at and they're like, ooh, maybe Florida can keep it going. I don't know. I think Ole Miss handles them, especially because of what their defense can do. Their defensive front has been so good. I think this is where it might come to an end for Florida. This mini run that they're on with all the feel good right now around Gainesville.
I don't know. It would be really funny.
Oh, it would be
if
hilarious.
Ole Miss loses, they're out, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Because, and here's where I'm going, because you've got the Florida side, but what was the last thing that we saw from Ole Miss? Biggest win in program history?
Mm-hmm.
You know, at home, sheets of rain coming down, a sea of ponchos out there. You know, you're high-fiving each other. Life is good. You just beat Georgia. The season's over. You know? I mean, all you got to do is beat Florida and Mississippi State. It's easy. We're cruising. We've got 10-2 in the bag. Get a whole extra week to think about it, too. Oh, man, so many high fives. So many high fives. Pats on the back, you know, just and now you're going into the swamp that has a little bit more confidence.
A lot more.
So
I think Bud asked the wrong question, though. It's not, is Ole Miss out if they lose? Is Florida in if they win?
Yeah.
that's true.
6-5 with 5 good losses.
Got to think about that.
Really good losses.
Really good losses.
Well, the one we can excuse, they didn't have their quarterback.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. We will be back on Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time for all of our Week 13 locks. So come and hang out. You smash the like, we give you the locks. That's the deal. Come early, smash the like, then we give you locks. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fridelli. You can follow him at BudElliott3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.